Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here with my Irish Readathon TBR as well as some recommendations for you all for all the prompts. So I'm so excited to start showing you guys what I plan to read. These are just a few of the books that I'm hoping to read in March. March is normally my best reading month of the year because I am just trying to gobble up all the Irish books I can during the month, and I always have a lot of fun doing so. And yeah, so these are some of the books that I plan to read that fit the actual prompts that we have laid out for the readathon. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, you don't know what the Irish Readathon is, I will leave the announcement video linked up above. So everything will be linked down below, all that information. So the first prompt was to read an Irish non-fiction book. I am planning to read Independence Memories by Valerie Cox. This is, I think this is actually going to be a very short read. This is a collection of stories, interviews and accounts of people who lived throughout the War of Independence in Ireland and those who were affected by it. And as we are in the 100th anniversary of the War of Independence as well as the Irish Free State this year, I think this one is going to be a really interesting one to read. I did actually request it from the publishers, Hatchet Books, last year, and I kind of kept it then to save for this readathon because I really wanted to read it for this readathon. So yeah, I'm very excited to get into this now and to finally read it because it's been on my shelf teasing me for a couple of months now and I just really want to read it. So for other books as well that I would recommend people to read that I have read myself that I've really enjoyed, one of them is Mary Robinson's autobiography, her memoir, which is Everybody Matters. I just love this book. I love Mary Robinson. I think she's just a really interesting person. She was the first female president of Ireland and becoming the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, and she just has a lot of really interesting stories, and I just love learning more about her, learning about her childhood, how she grew up, her early years in politics, and then her eventual rise to the presidency of Ireland as like a relatively young woman, and a young woman with a young family at the time as well, and how that worked for her, how it worked for her marriage, her relationship with her children, and everything in between. And then since her presidency and her time in the UN as well, Mary Robinson has gone on to become a real advocate for the environment and sustainability and raising awareness around climate change and the people that it's actually affecting. So she has another book called Climate Justice, which is one I would also recommend that I really enjoy, which is compiled by her, but it is stories from people in different corners of the world that where they are being like directly affected by climate change. The Her Story athon is also happening in March, and I would really like to be able to take part in that in some way, and I hope that maybe this would fit in with that as well. And other books that I've talked and raved about in the past are Republic of Shame by Keelan Hogan. This is about a non-fiction book about the mother and baby homes in Ireland, which is one that I would just really highly recommend. I read this last year, I raved about it, got very emotional about it, and it's just absolutely brilliant, so I would definitely recommend this one. And then also one of my favourites, A Ghost in Throat by Deirdre Grifa. This is one that I absolutely love. It's kind of like an autofiction slash historical non-fiction as well in a way, so we are getting two different parts of this book. We're seeing Deirdre Grifa's life as a mother, as a young woman, and a wife, a mother, and just her life, and then her growing obsession with this woman in history who wrote this very famous poem or lament for her fallen husband, and we see her explore where that woman ended up and what we actually know about that woman in history, because she's kind of been forgotten about in history, and Deirdre Grifa goes on this mission to find out more about her. The second challenge is to read an Irish children's book, and for that one I am going to be reading The Little Bee Charmer of Henrietta Street by Sarah Webb. This one is about two children. Are they brother and sister? Yeah, brother and sister, Eliza and Jonty, and they move, I think, from like a pretty nice area, a nice house, to a tenement house on Henrietta Street, and this is set in 1911, so like the tenement houses then, like they wouldn't have been maybe like the best places to live. Like there might have been a lot of hardship there for people, and people not in the best place in life, and the children get kind of a real reality shock moving from where they were growing up to their new house on Henrietta Street. And I think it's just about the people that they meet there, and the people that help them, and yeah, their experiences on Henrietta Street. And Henrietta Street is actually it's a real street in Dublin, and it's actually one that you can go and visit the tenement houses as well if you wanted to. They do a tour, and it's one that I was supposed to go to a few years ago, and then it was a really bad day. It was like a really rainy day, and they actually flooded, so we weren't able to go and see them in the end. But I definitely must try and go back and try and visit those houses and see what it was actually like, especially maybe after reading this. It would be a very interesting thing to do. And then a couple of other books that I would recommend for this, one of them is Lily at Lissadale by Judy Judy Curtin. We are following a young girl who goes into service in a big house near where she lives with her family, and she goes and moves into this house, and she just experiences like a different type of life in this house. She sees how other people live, people who are, you know, more like better off than her and her family, and she also becomes quite good friends with another little girl in that house who is connected, I think, to Countess Markovich. I think she might actually be Countess Markovich's daughter, and Countess Markovich was she was one of the leaders of the 1916 Easter Rising, and the only reason she wasn't killed alongside the other leaders of the rising is because she was a woman. But she is a very, very interesting person in history. This book is just really lovely. I really, really like this book, and definitely recommend it for people to read. And another book that I always talk about, but it's a great children's book, it's one that a lot of Irish children grew up reading, and that is Under the Hawthorn Tree by Marita Conlon McKenna. And this one is set during the Great Famine, and we follow 3 children as they travel from their home to these aunties that they've heard about, that they think that if they get to their aunties they might be able to be safe because their mother and father have died. They are obviously starving, they have nowhere to go, and this is the only place that they can think of going, and we are following them on their journey and just hoping that they eventually get to a safe place. So yeah, that's one I would very much recommend, as well as the other books in this series, including It's Wildflower Girl and Fields for Home, and both of them are really, really good as well. The next prompt is to read an Irish book set or written in the 1920s. So I can actually count independence memories for this, as a lot of these accounts will be from the 1920s, and it is focusing on the 20s in Ireland, that period of history in Ireland. Another book I might try and read is The Tower by W.B. Yeats, which I do have. It's actually in my mum and dad's house, so I don't have it with me at the moment. But that poem, that was published in the 20s as well. I was actually hoping to read the sequel to the Glorious Guinness Girls, which I read last year. And this is the sequel, The Guinness Girls, A Hint of Scandal by Emily Hurricane. But this is actually set in the 30s. I thought it was also set in the 20s, but this one is actually set in the 30s. But The Glorious Guinness Girls, the first book in this duology, is set in the 20s. So that is also one that people could read if they wanted to. And then another book I read last year that people might like to read is The Tainted by Clover Readathon. This is set in 1920, I think, yes. 1920 in India. Clover Readathon is an Indian-Irish author, and in this book she is focusing on a group of Irish soldiers who were stationed in Nandagiri in southeast India, and they actually mutinied when they heard about some of the atrocities that were being done to their family and back home in Ireland by the Black and Tans, who were like mercenaries of the English army and were just allowed to do basically whatever they wanted, which included murder and torture and things like that. And these soldiers mutinied because they were like, why are we going to fight and wear the uniform of an English king when he is doing this to our people at home? We're not going to, we don't want to be associated with him. We're not going to fight for him until things get better. And they actually were shot and killed for this mutiny, and this is a story around that, and we're looking at a relationship or a romance around that time, as well as some really interesting culture things in this part of India at the time. Some really interesting things around Anglo-Indian people at the time, and just some of the racism, the colorism that was going on at the time. I feel like I learned so much in this book, and it was written in a really, really great way, and I think Clover, she was able to just get Irish, like the Irishisms in this down to a T, and I really, really enjoyed it. So it's one I highly recommend people read, and I'm really excited for whatever Clover comes out with next, because I will definitely be buying it and reading it. So the next challenge is to read an Irish book that a host has already read. Obviously I am talking about a lot of books that I've already read here. I do also have a lot of books added to the Storygraph challenge, and I also have Goodreads bookshelves. I also have Goodreads shelves that are like tagged Irish and Irish author, that you guys can check as well if and again, you can always just ask me either on Instagram or on the comments here if I've read a book, or if you want to double check anything. So what I am going to try and read is Constellations by Sinead Gleeson. This also will count for a non-fiction book, as this is an account of Sinead Gleeson's life. I think is kind of chronically ill, sickness, love, grief, motherhood. I think it might look at fertility as well, like kind of just a story of being in a woman's body, and a woman's body going through lots of different things throughout like a lot of her life, and there's been a lot of praise for this book, and I'm very excited to finally read it. And I know that Leanne over at Leanne Rose, my co-host, has read this, so yeah, that is going to count for my book for this prompt. And I also might try and get to read Rock Paper Killers by Alexia Mason, and this is a really interesting YA kind of mystery thriller book which is set around teenagers, I think 4 teenagers who are travelling to the Gaeltacht in Ireland, and that is kind of like a summer camp that teenagers in Ireland go to where they can only speak Irish, and it's a place where teenagers are able to like improve their Irish skills. And the whole point is that when you're living in the Gaeltacht for a period of 3 weeks, you're only allowed to speak Irish. Like, you live in a house where the Banantee, who is literally translates as the woman of the house, she only speaks Irish to you, and you can only speak Irish back. And technically you could be sent home for speaking English, though I don't think they're as strict as they used to be. And this is set in one of these Gaeltachts, and we are following, it's kind of like a murder mystery, I think, with these teenagers, and that sounds really, really interesting to me. So I'm very excited to read this, and I literally added it to my TBR straight away when I saw Leanne reviewing it on one of her recent wrap-ups. I think it might have been her January wrap-up or her December wrap-up, but yeah, hopefully we'll read that during the month as well, and that would also count for this prompt. The next prompt is to read a book set in Northern Ireland. So I have 2 on my TBR that could work for this one. One of them is Truth Be Told by Sue Diven. This is a contemporary YA story set in Northern Ireland, and we are following 2 girls who, one is from Derry City and one is from Armagh, and I don't know if they meet each other. Yes, they have a chance meeting, and it turns out that they look exactly the same, and this is, I just think, a story about why that is. I don't know whether it turns out that they are sisters or cousins, or they are somehow related in any way. You will see. I got this proof from Pan Macmillan and from Book Break, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what actually the kind of mystery is here. And then another book I bought back in like January, when I was kind of starting to plan for the readathon, that I was getting excited about. I was looking up some of the upcoming Irish releases this year, and one really, really intrigued me, and that was The Raptures by Jan Carson. I think her first book, The Firestarters, got a lot of praise. Now, I haven't read that one. That one is also set in Northern Ireland though, but this one, The Raptures, is set in this small town. I think it's kind of maybe on the border of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and we are following this village when all the school children get sick from this like mysterious illness, and it's about this like sickness kind of taking over the village and mysteries behind it. And I think we're just following the different people in the town or the village like while this is happening. And then you see the people who like aren't getting sick, and they're kind of feeling guilt and shame, and then kind of wondering why they aren't feeling sick. Is there something wrong with them, the fact that they aren't getting sick? And it's just looking around kind of the chaos and the fear and everything that like something like this can make people feel, and of course we all know all about that living through the last 2 years. I do feel like maybe this one could be too close to home for some people, but for me, I do actually really enjoy like reading books around sickness and plague and pandemics and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this one like turns out, and yeah, I'm just really excited for it. I just have a good feeling about it, so I'm hoping I'm right about it. And then other books that people could read is also Milkman by Anna Burns is a really popular one, and one that a lot of people know that is set in Northern Ireland and kind of during the Troubles as well. Big Girl Small Town is one that I read last year, a couple of years ago, and that is also set in Northern Ireland. We are following a woman who is like, she just kind of wants to like live her life. She works in the chipper, and we see her life has kind of been affected by the Troubles in a way, in that I think her father was kind of involved in some way in some things, and we see that kind of not haunt her, but it kind of affects her and her family in specific ways. And that was quite an interesting one, and I definitely would recommend people read it. It's kind of crude and vulgar but funny, and has a bit of like a Dairy Girls like type of humour to it as well, that I think a lot of people would really like. By Mary McAleese is one that I think people would also be interested in. This is another memoir, another female president of Ireland. So far we've only had two Marys, Mary Robinson and Mary McAleese. And Mary McAleese, she was born and grew up in Belfast, and she was born kind of, and she experienced a lot of the Troubles, like the height of the Troubles, and she has a very interesting relationship, you know, obviously with Northern Ireland, and then also with religion. She's quite a devout Christian, and her relationship to God as well has changed throughout her life, and she has done a lot of studies like kind of theology and stuff like that as well, and I think she speaks around God really, really well. I've kind of seen interviews where she's spoken about her her beliefs and her faith before, and I think this is a book I really want to read. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but it's one I'd be happy to recommend to others. Having not read it, I would still recommend it for people to read because I've heard really good things about it. Another one, another non-fiction I see a lot of people rave about is Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe. This one is around the IRA and some missing cases during the Troubles that were believed to have been caused by the IRA, and this one I think in particular is looking at the mysterious case of a woman with a large family who had never done anything like in terms of like the IRA or the Trouble. She was just a woman living her life, and I think they think maybe she saw the wrong thing or saw something happening, and then she disappeared from her home and like was never found again. And I'm not sure if the IRA ever actually took responsibility for her disappearance. I can't remember, but maybe I should read this book and find out more. For our 2 bonus prompts, one of the prompts is obviously to read the group read, which is Boys Don't Cry by Fiona Scarlett. This again is one I'm really excited to read, and yeah, I can't wait to dive in and see what this one is all about. And the next challenge is to read a book with green on the cover, so I'm going to be reading this one, which is The Bride Collector by Siobhan MacDonald, and this is a thriller, and as you can see there's like grass on the cover, which is green. Grass is green, so I'm counting that one for this prompt. This one is basically just the case of what seems to be a serial killer who was killing women and then laying them out in their wedding dresses, like on their bed. And that's all I kind of really know about it. I think we're obviously following the detective on the case, and that sounds pretty interesting to me. Kind of reminds me a tiny bit of The Fall, which is also Irish. Kind of the way that serial killer, the way he always lays the women out on the bed in like a really creepy way. So yeah, this one might be creepy, might be good, might be terrifying, I don't know, but I'm looking forward to finding out. So that's everything I'm reading during the Irish Readathon, as well as a lot more. You'll have to check into my vlogs and my wrap up to find out all of that. I also do share all of my like my wrap ups, like my book wrap ups, on my Instagram as well. I always write little reviews when I finish them, as I finish them. So if you're not following me on there, please do cross and follow me, and you can catch up. You can keep up with all of my Irish reading during March there if you want to instead. Please let me know if you guys are planning to read any of these books, what books you are planning to read for the prompts, if any of these like recommendations were helpful, if you've decided to read any of them now. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'm so excited for this year's Irish Readathon. See you guys again next time.